Hello and welcome to Gluten Free and Gluttonous. I'm your host, Julie Young, and together we're going to explore the world of celiac disease and the gluten-free lifestyle. Each episode will talk to a different expert about their specialty and try a tasty, gluttonous, gluten-free treat.
Today we're in Columbus, Ohio at Cherbourg Bakery. Their bakeries in Columbus and Cincinnati are completely free from gluten, nuts, and dyes. Their savory and sweet selection is all handcrafted and made in small batches. We'll enjoy a variety of treats with Tayler Silfverduk, a registered dietitian who specializes in celiac disease.
We've got lots of treats to try. We're going to go drop some off with Taylor, and then we're going to talk to her about the importance of a registered dietitian with GI diseases like celiac. I'm joined today by registered dietitian Tayler Silfverduk. I really appreciate you joining me, and I am really excited to talk to you about not only the special treat that we got for today, but then all of the fabulous things that you have to offer as a dietitian. Tell us a little bit about your background and why you got into being a dietitian.
I got into becoming a dietitian because I was diagnosed with celiac disease in high school, and I became really interested in learning how to heal your gut. And I didn't join nutrition and dietetics to specialize in celiac disease. Initially, I was just here to deal with all GI conditions. And then I realized as I was practicing that I really loved speaking in my own community and helping people who have celiac disease because of the struggles that I had, and it just made for a much more rewarding experience. And so now I specialize in celiac disease.
One big thing that a lot of people figure out after getting diagnosed with celiac is that there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of myths, a lot of misunderstandings, and despite it being a fairly common diagnosis, in the medical world, there's still a lot of people who don't get it. Sort of what are the areas of life then that affects?
Unfortunately, we live in a gluten-centered culture and a gluten-centered global food system, so that can make life really, really difficult when our traditions are centered around food, when we celebrate birthdays and everybody's serving a cake and suddenly you can't participate in this family tradition, or you have a tradition of dining out every Friday night with your family. All of these ways that we gather around food and that we socialize through food and we connect through food, or even comfort ourselves through food, all of these things have been impacted, and it makes life really difficult if all of these things have been kind of feeling like they've been ripped away from you. And that can lead to a lot of challenges, which is why I'm here to help people adapt and still enjoy their lives and stay safe without feeling like they can't access all of these ways that food serves us.
And it's more than just food too, which, I didn't realize when I was first diagnosed, and this is something I know you talk a lot about in your programs as well as on your, Instagram page and your YouTube, of you have to kind of take any series like the one that I'm creating right now with a grain of salt, because everyone is different. And generally speaking, though, there are trends that we can identify that, sometimes there's gluten in medications or gluten in cosmetics, those kinds of areas that you don't necessarily think of off the bat. But if you find that you are having continuing symptoms after going gluten-free, those may be other areas where you have to dig into the ingredients and, make sure that you're switching to gluten-free alternatives there as well.
So it's not just food, you're so right, it's also your environment, and that can make life feel really, really scary to people with celiac disease. And my goal is to try to help them not feel scared, but feel prepared and feel ready to assess risk and take precautions. And so with the providers, the doctors, you also want a dietitian to help make sure you're staying gluten-free, to help make sure that if you are needing to be more strict, they can help you determine how strict you need to be in response to your particular celiac disease and how you're responding to your precautions. They can also help you with nutritional deficiencies and address any nutrient gaps that may be occurring in a gluten-free diet, because there are many that can potentially occur with a gluten-free diet. And they can also help you with your relationship to food, making sure that you are addressing that fear around it. And then On top of a registered dietitian, a GI psychologist can be really helpful too, especially if you're struggling with an eating disorder. They can help address the ways that celiac disease can kind of distort your relationship with your body, your relationship with food, and the way that you may be coping with that in helpful or unhelpful ways.
You know, regardless of how positive a relationship you might have with food, I just think that it so severely changes your life that, you know, a lot of GI psychologists say, like, you might just need one session, and that's totally okay. Or you might be like me and feel like you would benefit from ongoing care. For a lot of people, whether or not it comes up immediately, you know, at some point in your journey, there's probably going to be changes that happen. Like maybe you move, you're in a new area, you don't have all of the same resources that you had before. Maybe you get into a new relationship. Like there's so many just crazy things that can happen in life that you don't think of as affecting food and eating, but it does. And if you are able to access these resources, then it's a great opportunity. But I also want to dig in, talking about nutritional deficiencies. What are some common ones that pop up with people with celiac? And then how does that also play into, you mentioned like gluten-free foods, not necessarily having the same nutritional benefits as gluten-including foods. What are some areas, I guess, to look out for?
So there are a variety of nutritional deficiencies that can occur with celiac disease due to the small intestinal damage, specific to the duodenum of the small intestine, which is where celiac disease typically occurs. That can impact calcium absorption, iron absorption, zinc absorption, a lot of different nutrients, and following up with those nutrition panels and just making sure that everything is solid is really important. Vitamin D is another essential nutrient that can be impacted, and some of the B vitamins as well. So those are some of the nutrient deficiencies that can occur just because of the small intestinal damage, which is why it's so important to stay gluten-free, and it's so important to address those deficiencies to make sure that you're staying healthy. And then kind of to add on to that, with celiac disease, you're going gluten-free, and a lot of fortified foods are removed from the diet, and these are foods that are fortified in iron, B vitamins, a lot of those essential nutrients that we need, and that can further complicate things, especially if you've been relying on these foods in your typical day-to-day life, and now you're switching to the gluten-free alternatives and they're not matching up like they used to. I know healthcare access is a challenge, but it's really essential to make sure that you're following up, because people think it's just celiac disease, it's not a big deal, and it's really important we're helping people understand this is a big deal. This isn't something that we can just brush off or just diagnose someone and never touch it again. It's something that requires follow-up care, that requires people to follow and make sure that, one, your body is continuing to respond to your gluten-free precautions, and two, any nutritional complications are addressed.
That's, again, one of sort of the core tenets of this mini-series is getting some of this basic information out there and easily accessible, so that people can know which way to turn to make their next step. And I think this kind of naturally leads into another sort of big topic that ties into people finding that comfort level and finding options that give them some of that freedom that can be missing is cross-contamination. First of all, can you explain what cross-contamination is, but then also, some of those areas where you need to look out for it?
Yeah, so first I'll say cross-contamination is not the correct terminology. It's cross-contact. So cross-contamination is the biological contamination of food. This is where, for example, you might be cutting raw chicken on a cutting board, and then you go to cut lettuce on that cutting board, and now the bacteria from the chicken is present on the lettuce and cannot be removed. So with biological contamination or cross-contamination, the goal is to kill and prevent that bacterial contamination. So if you were to cut potatoes on that same cutting board, ideally you could just kill the bacteria that was introduced to those potatoes by baking them, frying them, etc. to high temperatures and killing that bacteria. However, with cross-contact, we're talking about the contamination of foods with allergenic proteins, which cannot be killed. You can't just sanitize it. You can't just cook it at a high temperature And this is where it's important that you're using that correct terminology, because in food service, you'll often hear people say, oh, it's fried, all the gluten's killed, or it's grilled, and the temperature kills the gluten. And with cross contact, you can't kill it, you have to remove it or prevent the transference. And so that's where it's important that you're using that terminology. And so with celiac disease, we have to make sure that our gluten-free food is not coming into contact with gluten-filled food, and making sure that people understand you can't kill it, you can't disinfect it, you have to remove it. So you can do that with soap and water. In most cases, that's a good way to reduce cross contact to less than 20 parts per million, which is considered and clinically proven as celiac safe. So with that, if you're living in a shared home, understanding what can be cleaned and what you might need to have dedicated. And then if you're dining out, understanding how things are cooked. And this is where having the cooking skills is really essential. And if you don't have those, make your life a lot harder. And that's another one of those, I would say, privileges, is understanding and knowing how to cook for yourself. And when you're dining out, knowing how things are cooked and asking for specific precautions to keep yourself safe. And that can be really difficult to do if oftentimes you're dining out because you don't have the emotional energy or the energy to cook for yourself, and now you have to expend all this energy educating someone else to do it for you. And also, you're trusting someone else to cook food for you, which invites inherent risk. And I think being able to assess risk, knowing what precautions to ask for, and keeping those precautions as simple as possible is the recipe to success for dining out. So usually asking for cookware to be freshly cleaned, chefs to change their aprons and gloves if it's necessary, those kinds of precautions to make sure that gluten isn't being transferred into your gluten-free food in a kitchen that has gluten in it. And this isn't I feel like that all sounded really scary, and I want to reassure people that it's totally possible to avoid cross-contact, and that's just where building your understanding of cooking and building your understanding of how gluten transfers is really important.
So I just want to get to our gluttonous part. It's super important to me that we show that no matter where you are, what you have access to, there's always something that, whether it's, like a sweet treat, dessert, or, savory foods, meals, that, you can and should enjoy your life still and enjoy eating even with celiac disease. And so today I went to Cherbourg Bakery, which is 100% gluten-free in Bexley, and dropped you off a few things. I won't lie, I got a huge box. So I got a couple of things that I put on this plate to share, but they have a quiche. This is a coffee donut. They have mini and full-size ones. And then your blueberry muffin looks so good that I was I need a blueberry muffin. So I got everything here, but if you have it and want to show us how it's working.
Yeah, I already took a bite out of my blueberry muffin because I just needed to know. I haven't had their blueberry muffins, but I got a blueberry muffin, it's hard to see, and a cinnamon roll.
This is a great example of they're 100% gluten-free, which is wonderful. But in the series, I am also visiting a few places that are not dedicated gluten-free to show, some of those options. But Cherbourg is great because they have a little coffee bar, they have places you can sit and enjoy your little pastry, and it's really cool to have a dedicated place here in Columbus, and there are a couple actually.
I'm always I have a resource for gluten-free dining now in Columbus, and I'm shocked at the level of and the amount of gluten-free restaurants we have. I was diagnosed around 10 years ago, and I remember there felt like there was nothing, and now there's so much. It's amazing.
Matt, so Gluten Free Street Gang, said in our conversation that it's we're in the golden age of gluten-free dining. And I have to agree with that. I think that talking to people like you and one of my sister's childhood friends who were diagnosed a decade ago, it's completely different. And it's still, obviously hard when you're diagnosed. But once you enter this world, you're wait a minute.
And
this is absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons why I feel so sad when people get hypervigilant and they avoid dining out completely, because the food scene has completely changed. We do have that new education on cross-contamination and cross-contact prevention that's better helping restaurants support us. And it's totally possible in so many more ways now that it really makes me sad when people kind of avoid it and not give themselves that opportunity to still dine out and have that experience. because it does feel like a golden age if you compare it to like way back when. Like, it's pretty amazing.
Right. Well, I'm gonna wrap up our recording here. So I just want to say thank you again, Taylor, for your time today, for all of your wisdom. And I'm gonna have all of your links in the description of this video. So your Instagram and your YouTube and your website, so that people can find you. You post a lot of informative stuff, but then also links to like funny, fun stuff as well. So thank you again for everything.
Yeah, thanks for having me.